and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is a podcast where we speak to comedians, clowns, and comedy writers from across the comedy world. Now, today's guest is a comedian who has a tremendous story. He lost both his parents by the age of 8. He's a man who's been doing comedy since 1996, and he set up a brilliant YouTube channel called Secrets of Stand-Up. He's written and he's been nominated for 2 Emmys. He's appearing on Comedy Central. Please welcome the fantastic Richard Francis Williams.
Hello. Thank you for having me on, Marvin. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, man. And just for anyone that hasn't heard about you and doesn't know about you or your work and how you became a comedian, what's a short summary of like how you got to where you are today?
When I was young, I loved comedy and stand-up comedy in particular. We had it on cassette tapes. I didn't know it was something you could do. And then in college, I was the host of this like cavalcade for the fraternities and sororities. So I was trying to do some jokes in that. And then right after college, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, they're having an open mic 2.5 hours away. You should go. You should try it out." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I did it and it went better than expected. I'm like, wow, I could actually do this. So I tried learning, and there wasn't a lot of information on how to do it. And I had all these bad ideas of what a stand up comic could be. But then I did my local club, and I happened to look a lot like Bill Clinton, and he was president at the time. Um, so I would do that at the end, and that would carry me. And I put everything into it. And I got an opportunity. I did the Adult Video Awards as Bill Clinton, and a club owner saw me and he said, "Hey, we got to book this guy to headline." I'm like, "No, I'm barely an MC." So I got my first road gig that went well, and the booker booked me all across the Midwest. I went to this comedy competition in Kansas City. I came in second out of 100 comics, and I'm like, I'm moving to Los Angeles. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. Within 6 months, I got a writing job for a website in 2000. And then I got hired on the Best Damn Sports Show, period, on Fox Sports, recommended by another comic, Brian Keith Etheridge. And yeah, just kind of snowballed.
And what when all this happened to you, if you were before you started stand up, what do you think your younger self would have said to you if you told him that you would be where you are today?
That's an interesting question because when my friends in the business get down on themselves, like one friend in particular, my buddy John, this was many years ago. I said, "John, imagine if I went to your 18-year-old self and said, you're going to be doing stand up comedy professionally. That's your career. You get to tell jokes for a living, and it's all going to work out. You're going to do voices for movies." And uh, what would his reaction be? And his response was the same as mine. Like, I wouldn't be able to believe that. It's so insane in a way to tell jokes for a living. I would be thrilled. And so, what happens with human nature is we get to one point where our dreams are fulfilled, but then we get used to it. And so, we're focusing on the next thing instead of just being grateful for as long as we can to reach that part. If I only did one of the things that I've done in my career, I would have been a success. But I've done so many things that I lose track of it. I remember being on a TV show and being like, "Oh, I don't want to do this." Like, what? I can't imagine telling the 18-year-old, "Hey, you're going to complain about being on a television show because you want to do something else that day." So yeah, I've lived out my dreams.
And with what before you got certain opportunities like being on TV, what did you imagine those things being like, and were they actually like? How did like reality trump the actual perception of what it was going to be like?
I thought that if you're on TV, you are wealthy. I thought that you became famous. Um, you get on there, and if you do it enough times, it's just another job. and you tell your friends and your family to watch it. Most of them do, some of them don't. It's not that it's a letdown, but the anticipation is often greater than the actual event. I'll tell you a quick funny story. My buddy and former coworker at Best Damn Sports Show, Bob Oshak, very funny comic. He was on Oprah,
Oh,
and yeah, they had like this new comics being introduced by legendary comics to kind of launch their careers. And he said, "Yeah, it was surreal because I was watching myself on the Oprah Winfrey Show from the break room of my corporate job. Like his life didn't change immediately. He was watching it next to the cake for somebody's birthday that week from the cubicles and the coffee and the tuna fish sandwich in the refrigerator."
and how did anyone else in the workplace see him as they were on?
Yeah, they probably walked in and like, wait, what? Aren't you supposed to have a private jet now? Like, I, he's like, no, I got to get back to work or I'll get fired.
Uh, with stand up as a whole, so you went to Los Angeles, one of the, I mean, now they say that New York, Los Angeles are the places where you go if you want to make it. And now people are saying Austin is also a place where you go if you want to make it. But with you being in LA, what would you say the scene was like when you first got in there and you got on TV? And what would you say the scene is like now after being 30 years and now going back to your hometown?
Well, I haven't been back in 13 years. I've heard that it's changed quite a bit. Sorry, my little dog Willie is trying to get. He's part of the show on
No worries.
YouTube. Um, when I first got there, it just seemed like the land of opportunity. There, not that they were knocking on my door, but it just seemed like the place to be. And there were shows all the time. I'm sure that's still happening. Um, but now it's become decentralized. There's a lot more opportunities wherever you live. I could have the same opportunity, not the same, but similar opportunities in my hometown here in Schenectady because of the internet. I mean, I could YouTube is my own TV station or movie studio. Podcasts are your own radio stations. The clubs actually look for how many followers you have on Instagram or TikTok or that type of stuff. Even for movie stars, I was watching Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter. She was on Stranger Things. She was talking about to get jobs and movies, they look at your Instagram followers.
Oh,
So you don't need to be in LA to do that. You could be in your hometown.
oh, okay. I did not know that. I know that they were saying that about comedy clubs, but I didn't know they were doing it for acting as well.
Yeah, because that there's this concept. I don't know if you have them in the UK, but bringer shows.
Yeah, we have a lot of
You have
them.
to.
Too many.
Okay, so you have to bring five people to be able to perform, let's say, for 5 minutes. And comics hate it. I used to run a bringer show. It was very high quality. We had agents and managers come. We had a Montreal comedy festival showcase at our show. So it was important to me. It wasn't a money grab, but everything in entertainment is a bringer show. The reason why Tom Cruise makes so much money is because he brings people to his movies. He doesn't call up his friends and family. He's a global star, but he's still bringing people. And so everything we do is part of building up our audience, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. You have to start thinking about the marketing side. And it's a great thing for comics because there used to be a handful of people who would determine whether or not you could be successful. Now you can go directly to the fans.
Yeah. There's loads of different, and you've probably heard about this a lot as well from comedians, and I think it's all across the comedy circuit, but they say it's a good thing because comics that have been going for 30 years don't get a look in, get to make it and be really good. But on the flip side, you see so many people who have a big social media following, they see being stand up as a quick way to make a lot of money by going on tour.
Hmm.
Um, it, what would you say is the biggest? So it's making things more gettable, but with more and more people trying to use the social media route, what do you think how do you think things are going to change? Because so many comics are now trying to make it bigger social media now. What do you?
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. That's I said what I said. Sorry.
Well, there was an interesting phenomenon in the late '90s when I really got going, where TV stars and reality stars that was just starting, um, they would go out and do the clubs, and comics would complain. Like Screech, the Dustin Diamond who played Screech, went out, and what that does for a headlining comic is it may take their weekend or their week at that club away because he's filling up one of the 52 weeks. And so there was resentment. And that's happening now with TikTok stars and YouTube stars going in. They're not really comedians, but they're headlining and selling out a club. So I understand comics being upset about that, but in the long term, they don't last because the audience is going there to see that person, that celebrity, but it's almost like a photo opportunity for them so that they can take a picture with that star and put that picture on their own Instagram, and they don't go back to those shows
Yeah,
because they're not entertaining enough. So in the long term, I don't think that it may hurt the clubs because if they do too much of that and the shows are subpar, audiences aren't going to come there as regularly.
hmm.
So there's good and bad in all of this, pluses and minuses.
What what have been instances you've seen, or where you'd say that you've come across yourself? Because I know that this isn't quite right and it's wrong, but I know a comedian called Mr. C. He's a black and mainstream circuit comedian, been going for I think around 20 years, and he said there was a big social media star who was headlining this black urban show, and they had him headlining, and some of the comics got a little bit offended by him doing it, and they said, "Right, let's get to work," and they all destroyed before him, and then when the social media star went in, he said that he died 1,000 deaths after that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, comics do that. Sometimes they reach a next level gear because they're petty and vindictive and they want to, like, it gives them motivation like an athlete. But ideally, you want to reach that gear every time you go out and perform. So while the motivation may have been, hey, I'm going to make this headliner who's not really a comedian make their life hell while they're on stage, all they had to do was an adequate performance and it would have been the same thing. Because if you're not a comedian, it's hard to be entertaining for 45 minutes to an hour on stage after people saw stand-up comics that are competent.
Yeah. So we've had a chat with this before in the podcast as well before we went live. But what have you? Yeah, I'm a bit lost here. What we mentioned? I've mentioned that I've seen lots of different, a few of your videos, and you mentioned
Mhm.
one about the Kill Tony about people. It's not the Tonight Show. They should be finding other ways to try and get ahead. What are your thoughts on some of the new ways that have people like Kill Tony, people try and get ahead?
Well, as far as Kill Tony, I know Tony a little bit. I used to see him around the Comedy Store. I know other people involved in the show, and that the show's fine. It's very entertaining. It's wildly successful. People like it. The point of my video was to tell comics, hey, I don't think this is the opportunity you think it is. So it's basically open micer comics going up there, trying a minute of material, which it's nearly impossible to judge a comic on a minute of material, and then making fun of that comic. To me, that's not my brand of humor. It's kind of like picking on somebody. Not that I make fun of everybody, don't get me wrong, but in that setup, it's not ideal for me. And I don't think it's ideal for a comic starting out because if you look at, they say it's a big launching pad for comedians. Well, it's been going for over 10 years now. There's maybe a handful of comics that have had success because of that show. And they have, I think, 6 to 8 comics on each show once a week. If you do the math, it's a very low percentage of people coming out of there that are big names. You also have to have the skill. So let's say you're a comic 3 to 5 years in. You have a set, you have an act, you go out there, you try to do your best minute. You're in front of, if you're at Madison Square Garden, how many thousands of people? You're not used to a crowd that size. You've never seen that before. That's going to be intimidating. There's a whole band behind you. There's Tony, there's Red Band, and then there's other professional comics ready. Like their role is to make fun of you. And so you're probably not going to be your best unless you're really good at busting balls with those comics that are there and being like a roast comic. So I've talked to comics who've done it, and a couple of them. This one guy, he did great, but because he didn't do well in the interview part, the one on like talking with the panel, it was just kind of okay. He wanted to stop doing stand up. I'm like, are you nuts? Like, you can't put all your eggs in that basket because that basket doesn't really return much to you.
Okay. And with the often traditional routes of like you do well in competitions, you do 5 spots, you do a small spot, you go up and up in the bigger clubs, and then if you do well enough in the big cities, someone sees you, get signed, and you go on TV. A lot. I mean, with those opportunities, there's still big. You should definitely still be doing that sort of thing rather than just focusing on social media, going on talent shows and all of that. And you mentioned it before that if you've earned your stripes, you when you have the opportunities, you're ready for them. What would you
Yes.
say? What would you say are the right ways of when you're chasing the right ways of progressing in comedy? What are some of the mistakes that you should probably avoid?
Um, Comedy's changed so much because of social media now. Some of the mistakes I think are trying to blow up or get famous before you're ready. Because just like those TikTok stars, you go out and you're headlining and your name is on the ticket or the flyer or the poster. That's a lot of pressure because if you look at it from an audience member's perspective, say I'm married, I have a wife, I'm bringing her to the show, we have kids, we have to get a babysitter, it may be snowing in my area, we got to drive through all that. And the first 2 comics I don't have very high expectations for, but the entire night rests on this person. If they're not good, I may only go to one comedy show a year. I'm never going to see that person again. So you really want to make sure you can deliver. All the hype, all the fame, that stuff's wonderful. But if you can't deliver, it's going to be short lived.
And what would you say is a so this is a thing that I heard from another great comic. Fair enough.
Sorry.
On the podcast a while ago. So Dave Bibby, he only motivates himself through setting deadlines. So like when he got a big award of Edinburgh, he said he only was able to do it because he set himself deadlines, and if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have been able to do it. I know you said that, um, yeah, if you get an opportunity when you're not ready, it could really do you over. But what would you say is also that setting yourself pressure and challenging things to get yourself motivated? Because I find myself, even as, yeah, as a stand-up, if I'm not doing something that's challenging or motivating, then I would do anything. Like, yeah,
Right. Yeah, it's a fine line, and I think you have to determine that with each opportunity. I love that idea of setting a deadline because because when they say a goal without a deadline is just a dream. Procrastination is one of the toughest things that face comedians, and my next video is going to be about that, because what it boils down to is I don't want to do it and nobody's making me do it. So you have to make yourself do it. You want to have it done. I want to have a whole new hour of killer material, but I don't want to sit down and do it. I don't want to do the work, and nobody's forcing me to. I can go out and just do my regular act. So forcing yourself by giving yourself a deadline or signing up to co-headline a show when you usually feature or are the middle act, that's a jump. Or headline a local
Yeah, okay.
show, as opposed to going into a club and headlining a full week. So if I'm a feature act and I'm doing 30 minutes and that's my comfort zone in clubs, book a one nighter where I'm headlining. See what it's like to do 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, that's on the bigger end, you're doubling your act, and it's harder sometimes to get that other half an hour than it was to get the first half an hour. So you want to make sure you don't bite off so much that you choke on it, because some people they get an opportunity, it goes really poorly for them, and they don't recover.
Hmm. What, what? Yeah, but with what? Speaking of like the big clubs and working yourself to opportunities, and I made a little joke about this with you earlier in terms of like we've got stories to tell about funny things going with comedians and pay. So
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna tell you a very funny story about. I won't say any names, but but I would but I'll say one of the funny stories that's been going on in the UK circuit for maybe about 15 years. I'm only going to say the name of this comic who this happened to.
Okay.
Like Ian Stone, he's a very good comic, brilliant comic, and he was storming at the Comedy Store in the UK. And beforehand, these people loved him, and they went up to him and said, "You were the best £10,000 we ever spent." And he only got paid like a very small portion of that sum, like £700 or something like that. And the booker, who I will not name, but he made so much more than that. And that happens a lot in comedy. And I've like a lot of my friends in comedy. One of the guys, he was told that he was going to get paid £300. Then he had to go to the small claims court to go and get it. And there's often a ridiculous thing in the UK circuit where normally if you have a regular job, you get paid at the end of the week or you get paid at the end of the month. A lot of my friends who are professional comics tell me they get paid in 2 months' time from that. And then
Wow.
what else are some of the things ridiculous? Yeah, there's so many things that go on. Like there's a big TV name apparently who's a millionaire who only pays tour comics to support. I won't say his name. This is hearsay. I've not met him, but he says that a friend of mine tells me that this guy only pays them £80. So these are some of the mad stories that, and the comedy industry and it's a great thing to be part of. There's some great people in it, but there's a lot of fishiness in it that can be a bit of the Wild West. So for new comics that are listening in, what are ways of them handling some of the nonsense as they start progressing, or should be prepared for?
Well, one of the things that's difficult with stand-up comics, and it's true of other types of performers, is that you may take a principled stand and say, well, I'm not going to work with this person anymore because I find it objectionable. And especially if they tell you, it's one thing to agree to an amount, they pay you that amount, and then you find out they made way more money. That one is kind of a gray area, because if you were happy with the negotiation, it shouldn't matter what they get.
Okay.
It does matter. Of course, it does matter. If this person's just booking you and they're not doing anything else, then you would want it a more equitable or fair arrangement. that's one thing that at least is a fair business transaction. If you're supposed to be paid 300 and they don't pay you, or they pay you 100, well, they're breaking the agreement. Um, the problem is there's 100 other comics that are willing to take that risk. So a lot of times that person keeps getting away with it because there's somebody else to fill the place.
Ah,
Um, until comics kind of rally around each other and say, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. And they do it on a small local level, um, because it's more contained. So in my area, there's a few different bookers, usually comics that book shows. And if something happens with one of them where there's a question like that or something bad happened, there's an there's only so many comics in this area available for those gigs. And if they all say, yeah, we're not going to work with you anymore, then it works. Um,
ah,
but it's hard to do that like with the TV star who's only offering $80. Um, I mean, what do you do? There's going to be somebody else to take it. So I've had situations where um, I was on a TV show. I was on the very first episode of a panel show, and we filmed the segment. I did this one joke, and then we filmed it again because it was the first time. They wanted to make sure they got a good take and everything was right. The host, who's a comic who I knew, who wanted me to write for one of their other shows previously, took my joke and used it for the intro to the segment.
oh,
Stole a joke right in front of me and the audience and the executives and everybody worked there. And for some foolish reason, I expected fairness. I thought that somebody was going to go, all right, cut. What are you doing? You're not supposed to steal a joke. This is outrageous. You can't do this. And then reality set in. That's the host of this new show. They don't care. They want the host to look as good as possible, even though they just stole from me. So what I chose to
oh,
do was I said, I'm boycotting this TV show. I'm not going to come here again. And there were friends of mine who wound up doing the show. I don't think they knew about that because I didn't talk about this, and the show's not on the air anymore. And they went on to have big careers. That show was a launching pad for them. So because of my own integrity and because it was important enough to me, I decided I'm going to take a stand. But I had to deal with the consequences of that, which meant I didn't get a lot of the opportunities I could have. But so what? I knew I had to live with the consequences. So for me to complain about the consequences would be silly.
ah,
I think a lot of times we expect I'm going to take a stand and everybody's going to stand there with me. That's not reality most of the time. So realize what the consequences are and be willing to live with those consequences.
yeah,
Do what's right for you.
yeah. What is the flip side that you've noticed in comics who haven't done that? Because I've heard from other. Sorry about
They're
all this
rich and
hearsay.
famous now.
No,
And
but
I'm on a bad 7020p um, laptop camera.
sorry. No, I've, well, I know that I've seen what's been an example where you've seen someone who hasn't done that, where they clearly like they've even though they clearly hated what they've done, what they put up with, but they've gone on with it. What have been examples where you've seen someone not take a stand and suffer the consequences mentally of not standing for what they believe is right?
Well, I'd like to say that there was some justice, that they had a hard time sleeping at night or something along those lines, but I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
I can't see into their lives and their minds. A lot of times, most of the times, they were successful. Sometimes that's what you need to do to be successful. I always thought that I was going to be successful or not successful based on my talent and my work ethic and my craft. And I reached a certain level of success. I'm certainly not famous. Most people have never heard of me. Um, but I made a living I made a career out of telling jokes and writing jokes for a living. That's a huge success for me. So yeah, you want it kind of like a fairy tale. If you go against your own principles and what we all view as right and wrong, you're going to pay some penalty. No, you're driving a really nice car a lot of times, and you're famous. So what? I am still happy with the decisions I made.
Yeah. Now, what has been what have been the moments over 30 years that have shaped you the most? What have been like the biggest moments in comedy that you've seen on stage that have shocked you, and what have been the biggest moments you've seen on stage that have amazed you, like where someone's turned a bomb into an incredible success?
Uh, well, as far as shaped me personally, the biggest shift for me, hold on, my dog again. Go lay down. Go lay down. Sorry. I feel like a parent, but they can't talk. And um, the biggest shift for me are twofold. When I started getting opportunities, I thought I can really do this, and I made a full commitment. I had a very good corporate job where I was a headhunter for a computer company, making a lot of money, and I left it so I could go on the road and sleep in my car sometimes, and I was thrilled with that decision. Um, the second one was when I left Los Angeles and moved back to my hometown. I left because I developed this rare balance disorder, leaving me dizzy most of the time, and it just became too much for me to deal with. So I had to kind of shelve my dream. Um, I came back and I started doing stand up here locally. I took some time before I did that, but when I got back into it, I was more authentically myself. I wasn't doing stand up so I could get a TV deal or a special or to impress an agent, and it relaxed me a lot more. My delivery style completely changed. I talked about other things that were more personal to me in a less jokey way. And so once that pressure came off, I was able to be a much better comic. As far as watching other comics um, bomb and then turn it around, that's one of my favorite things to do. There's nothing like watching one of your friends bomb. And one of my dear friends, unfortunately, he's passed away, Stephen Brody Stevens. Um, he was in, oh, I can't even think of the name of the movie. It's the biggest, The Hangover. He had a bit part in that, a few other movies. Um, he had such a unique style that he would go up and just be talking to the crowd, but it wasn't like crowd work. He would pretend that he was in an argument with the audience and they weren't aware of it. Then he would bomb. They weren't getting it, and he would act very angry and start bragging about things that aren't impressive. He would say, "How do you think I'm broke? How dare you? I took my mother out to lunch yesterday and paid half." And just things like that. And then he would smile and people would start to catch on to what he was doing, and they loved it once they got it. So that's always exciting to me. Watching Patrice Oneal uh, just punish the audience if they weren't with him on a joke, and kind of sit there and go, okay, now I'm going to torture you. That always made me laugh.
He's God. I really wish that he was a. This is not. Yeah, I really wish he was alive now because I've listened to some of his podcast segments, and like he's so refreshingly brutally honest, and it's just yeah, you can see how insightful he is as a person, and it just would have been so interesting to see what he would. I've heard from comics that have gigged with him that he would have absolutely loved and thrived living in today's market because he's such a good communicator.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that is important with comics. I don't think they realize. I heard this a long time ago. It stuck with me. You can't ask the audience if something's funny. And comics do that. They'll say their bit and their voice will go up as if it's a question and they'll signal the punchline instead of going up there and telling them what's funny. This is funny. I'm giving this to you. You react however you want to react. And it's that attitude of, I don't care if you laugh or not. I'm up here to tell you something and not telegraphing your punchlines. Let them figure out what points to laugh. I mean, you obviously can do a mixture of both, but there's something really magical about just going up there and sharing what you find interesting and funny and not caring what their reaction is. You're giving them something.
Yeah. How how what how essential is that for the audience to detect that you don't care?
I think that it's pretty important. I think George Carlin said, and I'm going to mess this up, but think about getting in a cab, or the equivalent now is an Uber. If you're in the back and the cab driver or Uber driver looks super nervous and keeps checking on you to see if you're okay, you're going to be worried about the ride. But normally, if you think you have a competent driver, you'll go anywhere they drive you to. As the audience, you want to know that the person is competent, that you're safe, that if this comic leads me down a dark path, it's safe at the end. I'm going to get the relief of laughter.
I had I want I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on this, but I had a very interesting moment a while ago, and it was at an open mic, but I found it quite interesting. There was a comedian, I won't say his name, but he did a joke where he was talking about staring at women on the tube and on the train.
Staring?
Yeah, staring at women on the
Yeah.
train. And I remember that, and it was quite intriguing to see how the females in the audience completely went for him. And
Mm-hmm.
even his female friend couldn't really back him up on it. But he got offended that the woman didn't laugh or that people didn't find it funny. And they got into a passive aggressive argument, like, when someone says, "Oh, that was good, this is good." But it was, and the thing is, when I was looking at that, I was thinking, if he'd really played it well and really delivered it in the right way, he would have got a huge big laugh from it because of the tension he'd built from creating such a tense situation. But because he did it half-heartedly and like not without much care or hard work or craftsmanship, it did terribly, and he was annoyed that it didn't. Yeah, he was surprised that people got offended by it.
Well, that's where the craft, as you mentioned, that's where the craft comes in, and being able to slip something by the audience and get them to laugh at something that they wouldn't, that if they just heard normally, they'd be appalled by. To get them to, it's persuasion, it's sales. Um, it's funny some on a rare occasion when a comic gets mad and starts yelling at the audience, but because that can be just an honest, truthful moment that they're having and they're expressing. But a lot of times, a comic will blame the audience and go, "Oh, it's your fault. You didn't understand what I'm saying," and laugh at how I said it or whatever. Or they'll use it as a saver. They'll go, "Yeah, you don't laugh, but blah blah blah," and they start getting used to doing that at the end of half baked jokes. But I don't know to put a percentage on it, but I want to say 99% of the time, it's not the audience's fault. They came to be entertained, they paid money. Why would you put it on them? The responsibility of the communication is on the communicator.
Yeah, and it's part of the fun of the job as well. You can find out what you did wrong, and then you can change it.
Yeah, I like to trick the audience into laughing at something inappropriate. It's fun for me because I do it without malice. It's like, oh, let's see if they'll laugh at this. How far can I push them?
How how clever do you think audiences are at detecting whether a comedian on stage is doing it with malice or is doing it to make them laugh? Because you can some of the instances where I've seen comedians who do dark jokes, you can see there's a lot of venom, malice, and distaste in what they say, and everyone can see it. And then they get upset that people get offended by it. But there has been the odd occasion where I know that that comic didn't mean to be offensive. He just took a risk and it backfired. But I've seen the people get offended.
Well, I think nowadays it's certainly different than it used to be. Um, the benefit of the doubt no longer goes to the comedian for a portion of the audience. There's a portion of the audience, I think it's getting smaller now, but they go there to be offended so that they can record themselves standing up to a comic or heckling a comic or walking out. So if there's audience members that go in there with the mission to be offended, they're going to find something to be offended by. Uh, and those folks have to realize, hey, you don't have to. For the average person, when I go and perform, I don't know who's showing up. I don't know if your dog just died. I don't know if your daughter has leukemia. I don't talk about either of those things in my act. I'm just coming up with examples. There's no survey taken of the audience before you come in where I'm personally directing this joke at any one of you. I'm doing this. I, I don't have any thoughts of you when I'm coming up with this stuff. And it may be from 2 years ago, and you're just hearing it now. But there are cases where I think just basic human interaction, you can tell when someone's being malicious. And a lot of times you could be right on. And the person performing, they may not realize it. And I want to be careful how I say this because it, I don't, I don't like to get into unconscious bias and all that because then that's putting stuff into other people's heads. But um, they may not realize how they come off to people. So I used to hang out at the Improv all the time. That was my home club in Los Angeles, and I was at the bar. I used to be a big drinker, and this older guy, he was like an improvisational performer guy. He said to me, we were talking about something. He just kind of looked at me and he goes, "You're really angry." And it wasn't about any joke that I did or anything like that. No performance, just person to person. And it infuriated me. Like, what do you mean I'm angry? And that stuck with me. That was probably 20 years ago. And I thanked him for it later. I said, yeah, I didn't know that about myself. I didn't see that. And so it was something on a personal level that I could deal with. And I appreciated him being so honest and frank with me. And I'm sure once I resolved or dealt with a lot of that, it influenced my comedy. Because maybe when I was being silly on stage, there was still that undercurrent of my personality, which had a lot of anger in it.
How what yeah, how was he able to tell?
We think that we go through life hiding all of this stuff about ourselves to present. Most of our lives are spent trying to look good and avoid looking bad. And so we kind of wear a mask. We don't realize that most people can see through the mask. I mean, I'm sure that there's many people in your life where you're like, yeah, this person, my guess is they're really sad right now, or they're depressed, but they're putting on a happy face, or they have unresolved anger issues, or whatever it is. This is a jealous person. I wish I could tell them, but I don't know the polite, appropriate way to do that. And
Yeah.
eventually, a good friend does. And then you kind of go to shambles because you're like, well, I thought I was tricking everybody. I thought I was fooling everybody with my performance in day to day life, but I guess I didn't do as well as I thought.
Mm.
It's kind of like when I was drinking, they would say, if you want to stop drinking, have somebody videotape you drinking and how you act when you're drunk. Because when you're drunk, you don't realize that you're drunk usually, and you get a bit louder and behavior starts to warp, and then you watch it back and you almost don't recognize yourself. Now, you could do that with your regular personality too, if you're trying to conceal certain things, or maybe you're not even aware of it. I didn't think I was an angry person, but when he said that, I started looking at myself. And yeah, I guess he's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it quite funny. Yeah, I actually, yeah, I prefer it when people are like that. I don't at the time when someone says something that's brutally honest and correct, uh, but you actually thank them for it because then when you think about it, but also I think some people who are brutally honest use it as an excuse to be an arsehole. And I think
Yeah, of course.
I think there's definitely a way you can deliver a message being honestly without. Yeah, I think there's a way you can communicate and be honest with people. But the thing that I honestly distaste the most is probably when people there isn't they're polite and nice, but there's no shred of honesty. But behind your back, you know the whole truth.
Yeah, I mean, I have a dear friend. He's not a comic. He's a painter, an artist, and he said to me one day, this is a few years ago. He goes, "You got a lot of quit in you," and that resonated. I was like, "Hmm, I don't like hearing that, but it's true." And so I judge those things by if they're using honesty as an excuse to hurt my feelings versus they're being honest with me. And despite whether or not it hurts my feelings and they may face consequence, me being angry with them or cutting them loose, they are a good enough friend to try to help.
Hmm.
Like he didn't say you got a lot of quit in you because he wanted to put me down. He wanted to lift me up.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of the. I don't know if you've seen that. You've definitely probably seen this program, but it's the comedians with Jerry Seinfeld, and there was another. Jerry Seinfeld was talking about where he was watching a builder walking by, or something like that, where they work 7 hours or something, and he says, if I can't do that work for comedy, I should stop. I
Right.
can't remember what that was. So you've probably got a more accurate version of that.
Yeah, sorry, my dogs are barking. 5 more minutes
Yes,
longer.
5 more minutes.
That's their code. Um, yeah, I've struggled with that my whole life with procrastination. We're writing jokes. I mean, it's silly to think, oh, I gotta go write jokes today. I have to make fun of the world and my feelings and all that. How could I do that for 8 hours? Well, what's the alternative? If you were working construction, you would immediately, most people, trade that to tell jokes for a living and write jokes for 8 hours a day instead of digging a ditch. But we make it this hard, impossible thing that we don't want to do, and then we're scrolling on our phone. It's because nobody's forcing us to write the jokes. So we have to find that internal motivation. But yeah, it's crazy that we would ever complain, oh, I have to drive an hour to do a show tonight. How many times in regular life does the average person have someone, just one person, listen to them for half an hour without interrupting, without saying something back? You get to go up there. They're paying you to speak, and everyone's listening. There's lights shown on you, there's amplification of what you're saying. You're on a stage higher than the audience, they're looking up at you. What a gift, what a privilege to have.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I hate it too. I hate sitting down to write. So write a joke about that.
It's that's the thing we hear a lot from a lot of comics, isn't it? You write what you have a strong emotion to. Because if you don't, yeah, write about what you care about. Because if you don't care about, why should others care about it?
And if it doesn't make you laugh, why would it make somebody else laugh?
Hmm.
I write the things that I find funny. And it's my job to persuade the audience to find it funny too.
Yeah. Now, following on from that, what would you say? is your advice for, yeah, comedians in terms of writing jokes, depending on their comedy style, and for comedians for preparing for gigs
Okay.
before they go on stage?
So there's a lot of different things in that. I'll try to keep it short with a couple things. One, the way to beat procrastination is to do it every day. So you pick the same time. You have to force yourself to show up. And if you sit for an hour and don't come up with anything, that's okay. You sat for an hour with no distractions and you did your best. You tried to put something on the paper. I started walking recently. I don't like walking. I went to a gym. I've been doing it every single day for 3 months. The reason why I do it every single day is because if I miss a day, it breaks that chain. And Seinfeld talked about that, marking down your calendar with an X so you keep the chain going. It's like when people are getting sober, they count the number of days they've been sober. So showing up every single day, because if you take a day off, it's going to be harder to pick it back up. The other thing, which came from a book in the 90s called The Artist's Way, is writing stream of consciousness. So this was in the book, it's to unblock your creative potential. Because people say they have a writer's block. So the idea is you wake up first thing in the morning and you just handwrite or type 3 pages until you're done, whatever is in your head, and you don't stop. So let's say you're typing, you don't stop typing. If you can't think of anything, I can't think of anything. You type that in. You just keep going till you have 3 pages done. I've altered that for comedy writing. I'll pick a topic like heaven and I'll write for 20 minutes, stream of consciousness, without trying to be funny. Whatever comes into my head about heaven. Do I believe in heaven? Do I not believe in heaven? What are other things? Whatever is in there that I'm not aware of, and what I am aware of, it all comes out onto the page. And again, without trying to be funny. And once I'm done, I'll go through and I'll look at the things that are potentials for jokes. When we sit down, the reason why I think it's difficult to write jokes is we're putting on I'm a comedian hat and we'll write something or not write something because we're trying to put it in a format of a joke. And so if something doesn't work, we don't even write it down. And we're trying to force it as opposed to examining how we really think and feel about a topic. So if we do it without trying to be funny, everything will be in there. And we'll put in things that we don't even realize we're thinking subconsciously. And funny stuff is going to come from it because you're truly examining something. So
Hmm.
that's what I would do on the writing. As far as getting ready for gigs, the best things outside of being prepared, obviously you have to have everything memorized. You can have little cheat sheets like I'll have on a Starbucks cup if I'm doing new material or a water bottle, a little label where I've written the stuff out. I'm holding it like this, so I'm seeing what I wrote there. They can't see it. It's better than going up with your phone. The phone I don't like because the notebook, when comics would have their notebook on stage, that was kind of annoying. But the phone is more annoying because it resembles or it triggers that part in my mind where, oh, they're reading X right now. It used to be Twitter or Facebook. They're in a phone call. Even though I know they're not doing that, that's what it represents to me. So I don't like seeing that. Um, and then the two other things, also a hypnotherapist. So this comes from that place. Get to the get to the gig early. Go on stage before anybody's in the room. Stand up there and visualize with each section of the audience you absolutely killing. You're doing your material in your mind and visualize the audience roaring with laughter. The other thing that I do, so that helps take away the fear of the unknown. It becomes a known experience in your subconscious mind. You see them laughing, you see it going well, the best you've ever done. I also do something from neuro linguistic programming known as NLP. I think that's popular in the UK. But I've anchored something in my body. So I have this ritual before I go on stage. I look in the mirror, I go, I love you, Richie. I kiss myself, I make the sign of the cross, and I go like that. And I go, "Wah!" And I've done that so many times before and after shows when it's gone really well, that when I do that little ritual, it gets my mind in the space of this is going to be great. And so instead of feeling the nervousness of the butterflies in my stomach, I view them all flying in formation.
Oh, bloody hell, that's. And how important is the pre? Yeah, how important is this? Is a bit like I watched Joe Rogan's interview with Guy Ritchie, and he says when he does a lot of things, you don't walk into things with your eyes half open. You walk with your eyes fully open, prepared for it. How important is it going into a set prepared or going to a gig prepared, do you feel?
Ultimate. It's the ultimate. That's part of the work. This idea of I'm going to go in and wing it, even if you do that, if you're an experienced comic, you're still relying on all the hundreds or thousands of times you've been on stage before. You think you're winging it, but you're not fully winging it. For a new comic to go up at an open mic and wing it, it usually doesn't go well because stand up is a different animal than talking to your friends. Um, you can go up less prepared when you have the experience, but you want to have a level of comfort, and that comes from preparedness and being competent. Having the experience that, yeah, I can deliver, I can do this. So it takes the nerves away. Because when you're nervous and not having fun on stage, that definitely translates to an audience.
Is there a way to hide it? No, I'm joking.
Slow down. To slow down when you're bombing, the experience of bombing, it's a horrible feeling. Almost everybody's gone through it. We tend to speed things up. We cut tags and some jokes from a bit to jump to the next one. Maybe they'll like this. I find that if I start tensing up and certain things aren't working, I'll stop, I'll stretch a little bit, I'll go slower because that changes my mindset. And when you're bombing, it's not because the audience doesn't like you. It's usually they like you very much and they feel bad for you. They don't, it's like watching torture. They don't want to see it.
Hmm. Yeah, you feel the pain.
Yeah. I was the audience warm up comic for the first 6 seasons of Last Comic Standing. So I would go up there, get them laughing cold. I would just go out, tell jokes, and get them ready for the show. And I remember one of the executive producers, Barry Katz, said, "Hey, we're going to do this thing kind of like American Idol, where we're going to show the worst of all the regional auditions." And I said, "Barry, I think that's a bad idea because you could show the best because everybody has a good joke that audition, I'm sure, or you can find enough. People like to laugh at jokes. They don't like they don't laugh at somebody doing poorly in stand up. They'll laugh at somebody singing poorly, but they're two totally different things."
Hmm. Yeah, the one. Yeah, completely. Um, well, that's effectively what we've got something similar about that. We don't have Kill Tony in the UK, but we got gong shows like the Comedy
Yeah.
Store Gong Show, the Upper Creek Gong shows. They are exactly the same things. You do 5 minutes, and you get three audiences in the crowd, and they lift the dongs up, and if they lift it, you get gonged off. But it's not really helping the comics; it's humiliating people, and yeah,
Yeah.
um,
I wouldn't subject myself to that
no,
because, again, it comes from the mindset of I'm funny, I'm talented, I'm going to tell you what I find interesting and funny. And of course, you could judge it, but I'm not going to have you humiliate me. I'm not, I, I don't give them that amount of control and power over me. The audience doesn't have that type of power. They're there to be entertained. I'm not going to wait for them to raise a gong.
It does get quite brutal with these things.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure it's entertaining, but it's just not for me. I don't even like competitions because how do you judge, who's funnier, Norm Macdonald or Richard Pryor? They're both funny. They're doing different things. It's the same, it's similar, but it's totally different styles.
hmm, but the thing that both of them have is they're distinctive and they got a huge array of people that like what they do, which
Hmm.
I know, and I've said this on the podcast a lot of the times. Um, but there's a great comic called Jerry Sadowitz. He's very brutal in his comedy, and there's a lot of people that hate him. But whatever people say about him, he has a huge audience of people that follow what he does, and he is winning it in the comedy game more than most comics ever will.
Yeah, and some comics aren't for everybody, but who they are for, that's all they need. Like, I don't like most pop music. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's bad to me. That's enough. So I don't go to a concert that I don't like. It seems like people do that with stand up for some reason. I think it's part of the, I want to hurt this person's career or something. I wouldn't go to a concert for a band that I didn't like so I could complain about them. It's not for me. Why would I waste my time?
Yeah. It's a bit like people trolling on social media. They could be doing something better with their life, but it's like you're taking out your nonsense. Oh, I had a shit day at work. My boss told me that I was too thick to brush my own teeth. But at least I'm not this person who looks this or that.
Yeah, and it's it's so interesting that that also helps make that performer more popular because if they have people that hate them, it keeps them in popular culture. It keeps them in the zeitgeist. So this person has their ardent fans and supporters, and they have their ardent haters, as they're called, and all of that leads to more a boost in the algorithm, the almighty algorithm, and stuff. So it's good in a way. Um, most people, most entertainers are polarizing to some degree. It's a, it's very interesting. Certainly in politics and political commentators. I remember Howard Stern. He talked about, and he did it in his movie, how the average listener would listen to like an hour and a half of his 3 to 4 hour show. The average person who hated him would listen 2.5 hours. They count as listeners too.
Oh, yeah. Bit like Floyd Mayweather, isn't it? He always
Yeah,
says that if you either love me or you hate me, keep paying.
right. In wrestling, they have the heel, the wrestler who's supposed to be the bad guy. A lot of times they're more popular than the good guy.
Hmm. They're
I don't think
unpredictable.
that a comic should try to um, shoot for that. Andy Kaufman certainly did, and he was misunderstood, but that's why he got into wrestling. He liked that whole dynamic of the audience, a certain portion of the audience not liking him because they didn't get what he was doing. He was intentionally trying to get them to not like him by wrestling women.
Oh, well, I didn't know he did that.
Oh yeah, in the 70s, he would get on and he would challenge women and he would say all these horrible things to goad them into live wrestling events. Like back then, the idea of a man wrestling a woman was unheard of. And he would scream into the camera and yell at women and tell them that they were dumb and weak. And this is a comic doing performance art.
Your dog has perfect timing.
Yeah, Willie.
Hmm, it is. Now, for anyone that is listening right now and they're comedian or clown, what advice would you have for two different kinds of comics? What's the one bit of advice you give to a comic that's starting out, and what is one bit of advice you give for a comic that's been doing comedy for a while?
A comic starting out, focus on writing, focus on coming up with killer material that's personal to you. I've had a lot of my bits stolen. I've had them show up in TV shows. I've had TV show ideas that I was in Variety with a group of people pitching, like talking about a TV show we were pitching, and it got stolen. It was on the air. You can't avoid that. It's going to happen. Write stuff that people can't emulate. The stuff about my parents dying and how I approached that, no other comic's going to do something like that. But you need really solid material. All the other stuff is great. The performance side is obviously important, but we know most comics by their bits, their signature bits. So focus on that as much as you can, and you have to perform as often as you can as well to work all of that stuff out to see if what you created in the lab actually works and tinker with it. And it's like being a watchmaker. You have to really tinker with these things and spend the time so that you give your jokes and your material the best possible opportunity. For someone who's been doing it a while and has enough material, focus on finding your audience. So often we hear the complaints about, oh, you have to have X many followers, and you have to have Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. No, you get to have Instagram, you get to have TikTok, you get to have YouTube. That's how you find your followers. You're sending this stuff out to potential fans. Don't look at it as trust me, in the 90s, I would have killed or died for a way to reach people, to share with them what I found funny, to be able to build up a fan base where people would come out to see me specifically, not just see whoever's performing at the club that week. It's a tremendous
Ooh,
opportunity. I'm surprised that they don't charge us for it. I get access. I have my own TV channel on YouTube. They don't charge me anything for it. I get to put this out there, and people who like it will tell their friends, and then they'll start subscribing. It's an opportunity. It's not, we make it into this big thing that, oh, I got to do, yeah, you get to do that. It's an opportunity for you.
okay. And for anyone that is listening now and they want to find out about you and your work, where do they go? And what's the best place to get hold of you?
Well, the channel is Secrets of Stand Up Comedy. It's on YouTube. Um, if you want to know about stand up, and as I'm honest and I guess surprising in some of the things I say, they can find me on Facebook as well. I guess I'm old school. When I thought of social media, I used to run a website with all comedy sketches in 2007. There was Funny or Die with Will Ferrell, and then I was running Blue Collar or Die, and we would do 3 sketches a day every single day. We did it for 9 months, and then they closed the doors. But so I was already involved in web stuff, but I didn't keep doing it. I amassed a lot of friends on Facebook thinking that was going to be the way to get the word out, and who would have known that it would just be for older people now. But you can add me as a friend, Richard Francis Williams, on Facebook. And I don't post as often just because it's not as relevant there anymore. But I wasn't big into self promotion throughout my career. I've never had a website for my stand up. I think part of that is I don't like being too showy. And I was also more of a writer in Los Angeles and Hollywood. So I was behind the scenes a lot.